Political nonviolence is not an ideology. It is not some sort of belief system that can be maintained and propagated. It is a tactic. That is it. And just like any tactic, it comes with advantages and disadvantages. But to understand its advantages and disadvantages, we have to look at the advantages and disadvantages of political violence. The primary advantage of using political violence is asserting direct authority and direct control over the levers of power. Violence is something that you can't just ignore, you have to deal with it. You either have to fight back or retreat from it, which means whenever political violence is used, one of two things must happen. Either resources, time, and energy need to be put forward to repel that violence, or you must yield whatever the target of the violence was. So, for instance, on January 6th, when we saw a lot of political violence directed at the Capitol, instead of using resources to repel that violence, they just retreated from it, allowing all of those political actors, because that is what they were, to seize the US Capitol. Now, that act of political violence wasn't very effective because once they seized their supposed target, they kind of had no idea what to do then, and then just left. However, throughout history, political violence has been used to much greater effect. For instance, why are you not able to just walk down to your local market and grab the food that you need to survive? It's because the state will send its forces to come and arrest you. That is also political violence. You see, they are using that political violence, the threat of arrest or hell, even being killed in some cases, to keep you in line. They are maintaining their control of the lever of power that is the food supply through violence. And through that use of violence, we are able to be controlled. Why are many of us not in the streets right now? Because we need to do the state-sanctioned labor in order to make enough money to get that food that we need to survive. However, violence also has the disadvantage of not usually being a very popular tactic. People don't usually love being violently suppressed. They don't love being arrested, confined, or killed. And even when the violence is not being directed at us personally, we can still be often pretty upset about it because we do not like the idea of forces running around committing violence against all sorts of people, because we understand that if that force exists, it might get turned on us eventually. The tactic of violence also usually has the drawback of being incredibly expensive. I mean, just look at our military spending. We have to spend billions and billions of dollars to maintain the systems of violence that our country maintains. But now let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of nonviolence, which are mostly the reverse. Nonviolent tactics such as diplomacy or protest are excellent ways for us to hash out our differences. They are much quicker and easier and more accessible than violent tactics because most people can just walk outside and start doing them. Not only that, nonviolence is usually seen as the more popular option across the board because, again, we don't like people who go around attacking and killing other people. But here's the major disadvantage of nonviolent tactics. Nonviolence gives you no direct control over the levers of power, unless every party involved agrees to not use violent tactics because of mutually assured destruction, or at the very least, mutually assured disadvantage of their own side. Every single party needs to see violence as more dangerous and inconvenient to their own interests than the non-violent tactics. Because as soon as one party in the conversation comes to believe that violence is a more direct, safe, and secure means of seizing their interest, they will use it. It doesn't even have to be true. They just have to believe it and then use it. If that happens, then nonviolence as a tactic has no response. It has no recourse. You cannot get violent actors to negotiate their way back into nonviolence without using violence as a tactic yourself. It has literally never happened throughout all of history. The only times in all of history that nonviolent actors have come anywhere close to the idea of using absolutely no violent tactics in order to get violent actors to stop using violence are the instances when those nonviolent actors are ready and willing and usually actively in the preparation to use violence as a tactic if the violent actors do not stop. As in, the threat has to be clear and apparent if you want the violence to end. You have to convince violent actors that the use of violence is not in their best interest. And usually, the only way to do that is to make them suffer the consequences of the violence they are threatening or using against others. That is the only thing history has told us works. The only thing. Even the tactic of general strikes, which is often seen as the only non-violent tactic to have ever worked when it comes to bringing a rogue state to heel, still comes with it the threat of dismantling the entire country in order to get the people's will. That is an example of the people asserting direct control over the levers of power that we have access to. That is violence against the state, which is exactly why the state uses violence to clamp down on union organizing, because they see that as a genuine threat to themselves. All of this is to say that nonviolence should be the preference of any good person. That should be the tactic that we go to anywhere and everywhere we are able to, so long as it is still effective. And the way we know whether or not it is being effective is whether or not there are actors still willing to ramp up violence against us. So I ask you, right here, right now, when you look out at the state of the world and how you are being treated in it, are there violent actors ramping up violence against you and your communities? If so, you understand what needs to be done. But if not, don't you dare use violent tactics. You would be a very, very bad person if you were to use violence. If no one else is using violence. Okay? So look out at the world. You tell me. You make that decision for you, yourself. Are there violent actors? I'm not going to tell you. You tell yourself that. And then you use the tactic that you should be using, which, if no one is committing violence against you, is nonviolence. That's my recommendation. That is what I want to see in the world. Yay.